So today we have with us Piyush Sharma. He's ex-CEO of Zee Entertainment, and he's also a CEO coach. He's also worked with a number of institutes around India and abroad as well. He's the board member at IIT Delhi. He's the Indian advisor to UN, and he is also associated with ISB and UCLA as an executive in residence. Welcome, Piyush, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Sahil.
So, sir, it's a great a portfolio that you have. Can you just run through the portfolio for us?
Sure, Sahil. So I would say God was kind. I was fortunate to mark out a life of success as CEO of a few multi-billion dollar organizations in my 25 plus years of corporate life. The immediate last one being as CEO for India and APAC region for Zee Entertainment. I am now a cross-sectoral leader. So my work dots consist beyond industry of the following four, which includes academia, startups, government, and multilaterals. So that has kind of given me an opportunity to hone my skill set in these areas, as also being recognized beside being an industry leader as a thought leader, as a startup and technology ecosystem leader, as a policy leader, and as an impact leader.
So, sir, this is a very diverse set of skills that you've honed over the years and gained over the years. So, what led to you changing careers? How did you achieve that?
So when I was passing out of my MBA college, Sahil, success was defined by worldly defined parameters, if I may put it that way, and they were name, fame, and money. And like I said, I was fortunate, and I got those quite early in my career as also a set of responsibilities, which most of my other colleagues, it came to them a little later. But success now has kind of got a new definition where I'm consciously wanting to move from profit to purpose, from influence to impact and inclusiveness, and from the whole concept of success has changed from those concepts of success to a concept of significance. Okay. So my new career is something that I look at as a calling, really.
So I've got one question, little bit about your upbringing. How did your father, mother, and schooling, little bit about something which is not written in the newspaper. Okay.
Sure.
Some kind of stories which you have been in school or college. How did you foresee in your college days a dreamer you would like become this one?
Okay, so family-wise, Hanumant, I come from a family of educationists and professionals, but my mother never went to. I think she only went up to middle school, and my father was brought up in a Hindu Pandit family in a Muslim-dominated area, a place called Fatehpur Sikri, and went on to attain his PhD and became a university professor. The story of who I am is actually owing to another part of my upbringing, one mostly in small towns of India, but also in a small, tiny little town in Jamaica, in Port Antonio, in the West Indies, where my father was there for a Commonwealth assignment, and I ended up doing my University of Cambridge and University of London from there. I did my larger part of my education at Chandigarh, and that's it. So largely a family of educationists and professionals, which has kind of given.
What kind of activity you were doing during college days?
Right. So I have been an academically bright guy. I was a rank holder all through the university, as also through my rest of the academic journey. But this is not to suggest that I have been a boring guy. I have been as naughty as you could imagine, and I have had my fun moments with a great set of friends and with great set of company that I was fortunate to have.
I'll go back to the articles that you've written for Fortune India. So you've said that in one of those articles that the homegrown big tech is arriving in India. But what are your views on it being all rolled in one big giant and not a varied group of companies?
So the epic revolution, as far as the Indian market is concerned, is marked by the arrival of the platform economy, and that's globally also true. So the most iconic and valuable companies around the world that you see today are all platform-based businesses. Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, and then in another part of the world, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, Huawei, etc. So platform businesses abound across industries, across lines of businesses, and across geographies. I think around the world, there is a unique phenomena playing out. Google, that started out as a search engine and became the most powerful media company in the world, is aiming to become a commerce player today. Amazon, which has been an e-commerce major, wants to be an ad giant. Facebook, the world's biggest social media company, has been now harboring commerce ambitions, what with the most recent launch of Facebook shops. Almost all of big tech, if you notice, is scrambling to create ecosystem businesses around five core areas, five big areas in one way or the other. They are message, they are commerce, that is content, that is cloud, and that is payments. Now, if you look at the Indian context, Reliance in India had zero presence as of the year 2010 in any of these areas, but is today successfully creating a most powerful position in almost all of these, right? Reliance is training its guns further on a range of businesses, which includes online, which includes retail, which includes content streaming, digital payments, education, healthcare, enterprise, telecom. I don't know. I mean, they're everywhere practically. So homegrown big tech to that extent is arriving in India, and which is the big difference because it is all rolled into one. It is more like the China model of WeChat that China kind of created, is how it may, things may kind of shape up.
We were also, myself and Hanuman are part of telecom revolution, which started in late 90s. And we really did saw a huge change in the lifestyle of our countrymen. So what is your take on Industry 4.0 and the rapid digitalization post-COVID, which especially has happened in last 6 months? So most of us feel that what we were pushing around many things in last 2-3 years, this COVID has really accelerated things.
Right. Good, great. So happy to know that both of you guys are with the telecom, from the telecom background. So as we know, once a product or service is digitized into ones and zeros, right, it can be copied and shared at a near zero marginal cost, thus making it get onto something called an exponential curve. So such disruptive growth clearly leads to dematerialization and demonetization, as has happened in the case of photography, as we know, and that kind of makes it available to billions of users in a digital world. Now, in the experience economy, we have come a long way from extracting the humble coffee bean as a commodity to making packaged coffee powder as a product to delivering service of a ready-made coffee to a staged experience in a cafe. So the progression of economic value that you see has actually seen the competitive position shift from undifferentiated to differentiated, while pricing has moved from base level to premium. So in money terms, this has meant a factor of something like 500x from something like 1 to 2 cents per cup of coffee beans in terms of a commodity, which now has gone to something like dollars, anywhere between $2 to $5 in the experiential economy. So in the modern day hub economy, I think it's a cloud first, mobile first, and AI first world where all industries are connected into a large ecosystem. So algorithms are very clearly leading to what they call as network effects in a platform economy, which unleashes a lethal business model where the more the number of users, the more the value of the firm. I think if I were to take you back to the year 1995, the top 15 internet companies of the world had a combined valuation between them of something like a $16 billion. And this at that time was considered whopping valuation. The top 15 platform companies, which includes technology companies and bond digital organizations of the world in the year 2015, as you fast forward, have a combined valuation of $2.6 trillion, right? So from $16 billion to $2.6 trillion, near $3 trillion, right? It's obviously not inflation adjustment that we're talking about here. There is something drastic that has happened to the world, and that is that the world has realized the power of platforms and platform-based businesses. So welcome to the world of ecosystems, which primarily is owing to digitalization of business across the globe. And the industrial revolution 4 that you talk about, which is a fusion of the physical, the digital, and the biological systems.
Right. So what are your views on personal data privacy, and how can companies be more efficient in safekeeping of personal data? And wherein in our environment and in Indian context, we are not having a comprehensive personal data law rolled out. It's still in the bill phase.
Right. Very well put. So data, continues to be at the heart of driving economic, social, and political transformation around the world. And we know that big tech has largely come up primarily over the last 25 odd years, since when data flows have surpassed what took centuries to develop. The trade networks and the finance networks financial flows took something like centuries to develop, but data flows have simply surpassed them. So the digital economy today is thriving, I would say, as an ocean of myriad technologies with massive data being produced and exchanged on a per second basis. Now, unregulated and arbitrary use of personal data raises concerns regarding the privacy and autonomy of an individual. And in an age of digitization, data, I think, is the most important asset in the arsenal of a company. And with the Indian digital economy size at something like a $200 billion, I think India is too lucrative to ignore for the world technology giants. So the swords are very, very clearly out there over the core commodity, which is data. Now, I think privacy, user safety, surveillance, data governance, anonymity, breaches, protection, regulation, what have you, data handling ethics, everything. I think all of these are closely related issues, with data being at the heart of many of the world's major most fiascos, the US election, of course, being the most visible case in point. And the all-pervasive importance of data issues is now being recognized with the GDPR in Europe, with California's similar statute in the US, and some other major governments worldwide. So I guess the value and vulnerability of data cannot be appreciated enough. Data for me is not a neutral field. I think governance is imperative. The technology giants have very clearly been on the receiving end of policy shocks from regulations around the world, restricting their unlimited powers as nations now try to assert control over yet another sovereign national asset, if I may put it that way. I think real life has institutions, not that they are perfect, but they've still stood the test of time. And more often than not, they've delivered. These institutions consist of the executive, the judiciary, the polity, the civil society, the law, the constitution. You can name them. Similarly, the platforms also need to incorporate public values of privacy, of probity, of security, of truth, of accountability, and of democratic control. I think it's important for platforms to realize that they need to be delivering public good and not the other way around. So net, my view is that striking the right balance as they try and make the data protection bills go, make it into a law now. I think striking the right balance between effective data privacy, security, and innovation is the key to expand the economic opportunity for India.
So my next question relating to the same thing, do you think have we missed on data privacy? Like it's too late, like it's already 20 years of digitalization, with telecom has been more a ubiquitous product, internet is more ubiquitous product, and till now we don't have a data law. So do you think have we missed on that? A lot of foreign players has come in, they have aggregated data, taken the data.
No, I wouldn't say that. In fact, like I mentioned, I think almost all the around the world, technology is almost always surpassing regulation. It is a clear fact that regulation is almost always lagging, and especially in a AI, ML, data-driven, IoT-driven, and all of the exponential technologies that are now coming in. I think one thing is very clear that nations around the world, states around the world, everyone is taking steps to kind of catch up with technology. So I think India is no different. In fact, in most of the cases, we've realized with the success of the emerging economies that sometimes just as there is something called a first mover advantage, there is also something called a last mover advantage. So India leapfrogged into several technologies which the developed part of the world struggled for something like 15, 20 years. I think on data terms, I would say India is doing a great job, and we're trying to, under Prime Minister Modi's regime, actually trying to create something which may actually set in place a kind of a framework for the other global states as they try and enact their own laws. I mean, TikTok is a case in point where what India did to TikTok is what has been cited by President Trump in the US for the reason of their kind of nudging or in fact regulating that within 45 days TikTok needs to find a new buyer. So very clearly, I think India is arriving. Yes, it may have been 2 or 3 years late, but not like very much late, if at all.
So which industry excites you most right now, and where would you look forward to exploring more?
Okay, so let me get back to history. So the human beings have been on planet Earth for something like 200,000 years, and the evolution of human societies is defined by worldviews. So for thousands of years, religion dominated that worldview. Scientists had to steer clear of religious dogmas before the scientific breakthroughs could be accepted as self-evident. Now, the heliocentric view of the world of Copernicus, or let's say Galileo's tryst with the church, are stories which are too well known. But post-industrial revolution is what saw religion giving way to science as the more dominant worldview. If you look at today, it is technology which is today holding the fort as the worldview. I think the human society has transformed from a hunter-gatherer stage to agriculture, to automation, to a truly knowledge-based society, right? So my biggest area of play right now is actually technology. I think it's an exciting interplay of technology, media, telecom, and tens of other things which are recombining and coming together, but technology is at the heart of it.
You talked about that we moved to a more knowledge-based society. On the back of that, I had one question that you've quoted in one of the videos that I was researching. You've quoted Ernest Hemingway saying that education is a systematic way of robbing one of his or her creativity. And then you go on to say that thinking can be taught. Aren't these two contradictory statements?
In all my training, workshops, and other interactions with participants around the world on the subject of thinking, I generally pose this question: can thinking be taught? And invariably, the majority of them believe that it cannot be done. And that takes me to the challenge: when does a human being start thinking? Now, this is where the struggle begins. The answers are since birth. A few of them even suggest that it begins in the womb, right? While others give vague answers. Now that takes me to the next salvo, which is that while majority of first years of our lives are spent predominantly in getting educated, we cannot answer such a basic question. Even as we all would wish to believe that thinking cannot be taught, the reality is pretty different. 16 years of formal education, the purpose of education being to convert an empty mind into an open mind, does not prepare us to be able to answer this basic question. When do we start thinking? The answer requires thinking besides some empirical knowledge, okay? Research tells us that from birth onward, sensing is the immediate ability directed at an ambient world and the body. Now, this is holistic, where patterns of relationships are embedded in what they call as patterns. So sensation is, period. This is followed by imagining from the age of 1 onwards. Imagining is sensing-based envisioning, which is holistic and creative. So perception is prelingual. As a child grows up, thinking or cognition starts from the age of 2 onwards, as researchers kind of point out. Now, this is guided by cultural models, language, other symbolic systems. So conception is very, very clearly postlingual. So thought is predominantly a linguistic activity. Languages are a product of formal education, and languages do not permit a vacuum. They cover the entire semantic universe. So by the end of this little exercise, I have an open audience who kind of start looking up to the session, and by the end of the program or the workshop, I have a convinced audience which now believes that yes, thinking can be taught. Good that you asked me this question. This is one of my favorite areas of work with which
this actually really intrigued me to ask, actually, because these two things are pretty much, if you talk to someone about this, they'll point out that, you said this and now you're saying this. So that is a very intriguing question.
Right.
Mr. Piyush, like we have been meeting here, developing a lot of new entrepreneurs. Now, we have seen people earlier used to start from 30 years, year of 30, 35. Now, we have seen all the 45, 50 startup we are advising. There are young guys, third year, fourth year. What would be your advice for them, for starting a new journey, new form, new companies? What is your advice? Why there's so much, so many people are coming up, like I haven't seen my college days in IIT, anybody was thinking of, starting a company. Today, 25% people are starting a company.
So you are reminding all of us of our age, except of course Sahil, who's pretty young, and thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that, because that's the age that we come from. But jokes aside, I think I have the highest regard for entrepreneurs first and foremost. I consider entrepreneurship as public good. I think the fact that in India, as high as 90% of entrepreneurial ventures go to fail, when in US it is only 75%, means that entrepreneurship is a problem worth solving. I think it is the key to human capital transformation. I think it can lead to social and inclusive innovation. We all know that around the world, as also in India, as much as 75% of the MSMEs are the ones who provide employment. The big companies do not create employment. Oh. So in terms of impact, in terms of scale, in terms of mission, scale, as you mentioned, now is running into billions of dollars with those unicorns. I think entrepreneurs deal in a very difficult, they live a very, very difficult life. So they need to have, they need to have idea, they need to have execution, and yet they would fail. They need to have the right people, they need to have the right team, they need to have right mentors, yet they would fail. So they need to have resilience, they need to have passion, yet they would fail. They need to have funding. With all of these things still going right for them, they still need that thing called luck, right? So I think it's important, if you're asking for my message to the entrepreneurs, I think it is important to understand the concept of failure in their head, or at least reframe the concept of failure in their head. I think it's important for any new startup to really follow the code of launch, iterate, pivot. Launch, iterate, pivot. I think failing fast, failing early, failing cheap, launching, iterating, pivoting, fail. Embrace failure. It is the key to success. And the whole concept of failure as it exists in the current definition, or as the world looks at it, is not something that I agree with. I think failure is simply a shortfall. It is evidence of the gap between vision and current reality. I think one has to look at it as an opportunity for learning. I think it is about inaccurate pictures of current reality. It is about strategies that did not work as expected. It is about the clarity of the vision that I have. Failures are not about our unworthiness or our powerlessness. I think failure is the key to success. Especially an entrepreneur has to know this, and he has to continue to fail fast, fail early, fail cheap, so that he gets there.
I've got a counter question. There are people immediately after the college they're opening. So do you advise them to work 1-2 years and start a journey, or directly from the college, saying 2 years is again he's wasting his time? What will be, based on whatever you have done research and your experience has been, what should be the ideal time for starting the journey?
So not my research, but I know that research in the US throws up, I think I will have to one will need to recheck this, but I think the age bracket of 27 to 34 is where they have found the largest proportion of the unicorns. We know that today there are about 390 plus unicorns around the world, and they are the headline grabbers, and they are the ones who kind of motivate others to get into that zone. 27 to 34, as far as the Western research, if I'm getting my numbers right, is the kind of age at which you see the highest success. Now, the point that you raise is possibly related to a situation of, being able to get a fix between theory and practice, right? So 16, 18 years of formal education kind of just continues to give us theory. And you're saying these guys just out of college decide to set up a business, and in 5 years, they are expecting 3 years, they are expecting to become a unicorn. Is that a good way to do it? So I have a different take on the subject. I think theory and practice need to be understood in the following manner. I think theory is years and years of practice combined or condensed into, wherein I'm able to benefit from the wisdom of some 300 years, 3,000 years, tens of people. I could be reading Buddha, I could be understanding what happened to Bill Gates, I could be understanding tens of things, and yet there are the challenges which one faces on a daily basis, because your business plan is one of the first things that goes out of the window as soon as you actually are a startup and trying to do that. So I think it's important to understand that startups are different animals as compared to large organizations. A bonsai is a different thing as compared to a large tree. So the strategies that work for large organizations are not necessarily the strategies that will work for small organizations. But yes, if you have some experience, it gives you a helicopter view. It gives you an ability to zoom in and zoom out. It also provides you with an opportunity to be able to have a helicopter view of things. So I think that is something which are all the very important checkpoints for an entrepreneurial success to have.
So my next question is, like, what has happened to COVID? Nobody was starting. what should one leader do in this kind of situations?
So leadership is not about a position. I think leadership, one has to understand, is about taking responsibility. So one of the simplest things that I do when I have to, in workshops, when I have to kind of bring the executives or the trainees and understand the concept of leadership, is I give the example of this new class in a new school where all the students have come in for the first time. So it's a new group that you have assembled for the very first time. So let's say after my graduation, I've just taken admission into an MBA college and 30 or 50 of us have come together in this class. Now imagine as 50 of us enter this class, there is, paper torn and paper spread all over the place, right? Now, out of these 50 people, probably 40, 45 of them are already now sitting on their benches and nobody has cared to pick up the papers and put them in the dustbin. All right. Now, suddenly this 46th guy enters, and as he enters, he does not go to the seat, but he goes and starts picking up these papers one by one, right? The torn papers. Now, after seeing him, another person gets up and he also starts doing it. Another person gets up and she also starts doing it. And dhire dhire, you see that some 7, 8, 9, 10 of them start picking it up. All right. And over a period of the next 2 minutes, they are able to get the entire class clean. And after that, this guy goes down and settles in his chair. Now, at the end of first session of the first MBA class, the teacher at the end says, you guys have to choose a leader from amongst yourselves. I know that you have had no opportunity to interact between yourselves, but were you to choose a leader, who would you choose? The answer is a no-brainer, right? Leadership is about taking responsibility. It is about the person who does not look at it as a privilege, who does not look at it as a position. So in COVID times, as you asked, I think I, as a leader, have to understand that I have to continue to do my job right, which is looking at the bottom line, looking at the top line, engaging people, providing facilities, understanding the changed environment, looking at how things can still be optimized, maximized, and looking at taking on all the kind of new challenges that the new normal is kind of advocating for us.
So, sir, how significant is the role of consumer engagement in building a company's brand?
I think very, very important. I think all the businesses, if we are talking about B2C businesses today, I think all the businesses very, very clearly today are businesses which are in the business of aggregation of consumers, engagement of consumers, and monetization of consumers. Now, if you look at the business, then aggregation of consumers is something which is a direct function of how much venture funding is available. So if your idea is good, if your team is good, I think enough lifeline can be made available through the venture fund, where aggregation of consumers like Jio has demonstrated something like 350 million numbers of consumers over a 3-year time period. It is something which the world has known how to crack the code. So it's no big deal now. If venture fund is available, this can be done. The other is, if you've been in the business long enough, monies will, some kind of a business model or a revenue model can be figured out where the business will start making money. So monetization is also not as big a challenge. What remains the biggest challenge is the third one, which is aggregation of consumers. The code is cracked. Monetization of consumers, the code is cracked. As far as engagement of consumers is concerned, it remains one of the biggest and the largest challenges. I think it is one of the ones where content is today playing a very, very big part. So you're realizing that companies, whether they are ride-sharing companies or I'm not only talking about the OTT platforms and Netflixes of the world. All kinds of companies are today investing in all kinds of content to kind of keep these consumers engaged. So engagement, I think, plays one of the most important roles.
NASSCOM has recently published a report on SaaS Storm, and Indian companies are not so predominantly in the global space. So taking this thing of consumer engagement, how can we build more Indian MNCs?
Yep. So I think the code is clear. The way, like I said, the 5 biggest areas right now. So technology, of course, is at the heart of all of these, which is message, which is content, which is cloud, right? So if we are able to see the power of computing, if we are able to see the power of idea, if we are able to treat the world as your oasis, if we are able to look at the entire thing as a global market, as a connected market. So where connectivity, where computing power, where all of these things play a large role, is something where I think the opportunity exists for India, because traditional gains, the biggest right now opportunity that is presenting itself is in terms of the geopolitical shift, right? And
Right.
which is where a US-China trade war is possibly leading to a situation where so many companies are today looking at relocating their bases. And in that, India has a big opportunity. We also realize that the MSME sector in India is highly under-leveraged.
True.
So the ability to be able to make the most of the under-penetrated and the under-leveraged MSME sector is something which the government can provide a support ecosystem for. And I think the demographic dividend that as it is the Indian marketplace offers is something which gives an opportunity for the firms to make large profits in the domestic market, master the domestic market. And India is a pretty difficult market to master. If we are able to master this market, I think going global is something which should be par for the course, child's play.
So, sir, my next question is, since you are a CEO coach also, so how do you deal with different personalities and, egos? And because not all personalities are easy to deal with, especially during these times also and earlier times also.
So I think India is like we were discussing, India is the engine of massive global economic activity, and leaders in India are experiencing challenging times. They relate to truncated business cycles, digital transformation, young millennial workforce, greater demand for all-round consistent performance, and the world that we are living in, which is a VUCA world, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, right?
Right.
So delivering against breakthrough expectations at the extraordinary stress levels that CEOs have, I think the leadership in India is in dire need of coaching. Now, strangely, coaching in corporate India has traditionally had a stigmatized connotation. And this is despite the Indian tradition of the Guru Shishya Parampara, which perhaps defines the oldest coaching approach in the world. So the gurus, as you would recall, the wise seers and the rishis, they were sought after by powerful kings as borne out in the Vedas, Upanishads, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Dharam Shastras, right? The Shishyas received, besides other insights, the opening of eyes to self-awareness and self-realization. The greatest coach, Krishna, as we know, transformed Menti Arjuna on the battlefield while delivering those invaluable life lessons, both personal, professional, all kinds of lessons, finally culminating into our holy book, the Bhagavad Gita. So coaching stood institutionalized in ancient India. Almost all top kings benefited from the wise counsel of coaches, who would be called Rajgurus besides their formal cabinet. I think the Buddha was, he was perhaps the original postmodernist whose teachings placed optimum emphasis on both the heart and the mind, thereby laying the foundation for an integrated and holistic perspective. Where the Indian and the Western model is different is that the Indian mindset, the Indian executive mindset is comfortable with the idea of duality. Duality exists for us. And we look at the world, the Indian executive looks at the world as shades of gray, unlike a Western binary view, which is derived from a formal contractual relationship based on, logical questioning. So the coaching that works, therefore, in India is one that understands and incorporates a nurturing and empathy-driven style. Active listening, I think, yet dispassionate, non-judgmental observation as a witness, what is known as Sakshi Bhav, is the key.
True.
Yeah. Mentee-centered approach, which characterizes the Indian coaching style as perhaps classically different from the Western model. So leaders, all leaders realize that learning is a stance, it's a way of professional being. Leaders must be learners to make a difference. And all successful coaches, I think, realize that they need to continuously keep changing lenses to perspective eyes, right? The subject's lens, the objective bystander lens, and that of a trusted resource. So mindfulness, I think, listening and objective analysis all help. I think leadership coaching is most definitely an art that requires skill, contextual understanding, empathy, practice, and I would say delivery for effective transformation and transition.
Actually, the last answer is a great segue to my next question. So, can you share more details about your spiritual journey?
Sure. So, I think the world can be quite an overwhelming place, and the desire to escape is strong. So I have been a curious student of life by calling, I would say. I would describe myself as a seeker with a deep interest in spirituality and have been a lifelong student of Indian philosophy, the Vedas and the Upanishads. I do enjoy insights into the inner worlds and the outer worlds. I began my spiritual journey a few years back. I have trained under top Indian acharyas and international Zen masters to become a certified yoga and meditation practitioner and teacher. This has seen me sleeping on ashram floors, cleaning asana practice zones and utensils as a part of seva, attending master classes on Vedanta and Bhagavad Gita. So, there is, of course, work which was there, but beyond work, there is family, there is community, and there is the self. So, family, of course, consists of travel, photography, Netflix, binge watching, I would say. In terms of community, I take it's a kind of give back that I look at. So there is academia where I speak, I teach, I write, I mentor, I engage, and there is voluntary work that I do with social and development organizations in terms of in the space of sustainability, as you know, as also voluntary work that I do with the government. The last quadrant for me is the quadrant of self, which is where I have consciously started undertaking my spiritual journey. So I think this world can be quite an overwhelming place. The desire to escape is strong. So I've been a curious student of life by calling. I would describe myself as a seeker with a deep interest in spirituality and have been a lifelong student of Indian philosophy, of the Vedas and Upanishads. I enjoy insights into the outer worlds and the inner worlds. I began my spiritual journey a few years back. I have trained under top Indian acharyas and international Zen masters to become a certified yoga and meditation practitioner and teacher. This has seen me sleeping on ashram floors, cleaning asana practice zones and utensils as a part of seva, attending master classes on Vedanta and Bhagavad Gita, chanting in satsangs, immersing in deep meditations and observing long silence fasts. This is all while living in a community cohort. Today, when I have become a student of spirituality and have spent a number of years, is when I know that how little do I know about spirituality. So had you asked me this question a couple of years ago, being an Indian who studied Sanskrit till class 12 and who had all along been studying spirituality, I would have claimed spirituality is something which runs in my blood. Spirituality as an Indian, मुझसे क्या बात कर रहे हो भाई? Spirituality, हमसे ऊपर spirituality कौन जानता है? मैं तो मतलब I am a god on spirituality. But today the situation is, when I have actually undertaken this journey, is when I realize that how shallow the whole thing was and how little do I know of this large world which is out there. So I think I have always been wizened about the fact that the Western and the Eastern models are two different models. The Western model primarily concerns itself with its obsession of the West, obsession of the outside world, right? Which is where you have seen the Marco Polos of the world undertake those exploration journeys into the world's outside and, explore a down under Australia or a new continent called America or whatever, right? Or a Columbus, what he did. But in the context of Indian sages and seers, what we do realize is that they enabled us to understand that as much of the universe or as much of the world as it exists outside, there is a far greater and a far deeper world which is inside, and which is a journey that you need to undertake. So I had constantly been just reading about it and postponing it. But this experience that I had in terms of getting engaged with yoga, getting engaged with meditation, getting engaged with a community, staying with them, doing those things which they would call as a seva or a satsang or observing those fasts, it really truly enabled me to connect with myself. And what prompted me was that I knew somewhere that this is something which needs to be done. And if all of these four things come together, then boom, you have magic.
Wow.
So that is where I think a physical, emotional, mental or intellectual, as also a spiritual thing makes one complete. The way
Tell me the beginner, somebody who's seeking, he should start with a meditation and he should start with a yoga. Which one will be the best for him, making him happy?
So the two are essentially two different things. Now one needs to understand this. So yoga hum bol rahe hain use, but what it is clearly yog, right? Which comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, and which basically means addition, sum, 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 right? So the whole Indian philosophy has been that that you are connected to the world, that kan kan mein Bhagwan, that everything is connected to everything else, and that there is nothing called I, there is nothing called me, there is nothing called this, and everything is connected, and all souls are connected and super souls are connected. which is the basic theory on which the whole concept works on. So you would be surprised to know that out of, I think, 196 sutras in Patanjali, no more than 4 or 6 concern themselves with the asanas, right? But and yoga Indians have discovered, the modern India has discovered after hundreds of years, when we had just forgotten about it over the last 120 odd years, with Swami Vivekananda going to the West and the West discovering yoga for us, and the West, typical as it is, has run away with or obsessed itself with the physical aspect of yoga, which is the exercising aspect of yoga or the asana aspect of yoga. And they have looked at it as an alternative stream to the very volatile gym-driven, equipment needing construct of a typical Western model of a physical fitness. So, which is the normal context in which yoga has been understood by the West, and unfortunately that is the one that has come back to modern Indians also. But when you realize that no more than 4 or 6 of the sutras really concern themselves with the asanas, and it is so much about a way of life, is where yoga needs to be understood truly, because when you do it is when you concern yourself in a meditative way, right? Every asana that you do, the whole deal is not to push beyond, the whole deal is to be able to hold that asana in that form in a meditative pose for as long as you can. One fun fact about me is that I can stand on my head, right? I could initially not stand at all. I would not even dream of, dare to do that. Today I can possibly stand for 5-7 minutes, which I have done as a par for the course thing. So I think you could start anywhere. It is important to begin the journey. It is important to become aware. It is important to take that step. Then everyone has a different journey. The journey will take you wherever it needs to. You will find where your interest is.
So which is your favorite scripture which you find closest to your heart?
No, so I would not, unlike movies where we would have those favorites, in scriptures, each one of them give their own different set of learnings and insights. And I wouldn't discriminate a Veda from and some of them are derived from the others, right? And we know that the entire Hindu thing is that Shruti and Stuti, right? So it is all received. It is not as if somebody has written it down, but I have enjoyed, like I said, all of them. Bhagavad Gita is something that you would come back to time and again, because every time you revisit after a certain years, it connects with you in a totally different manner.
Different way.
And there is, of course, Vedas and Upanishads that I have even done courses from Harvard on, one of those online courses that they give on Coursera. So I wouldn't discriminate and say this is my favorite and that one is not. I think Gita is one that will come the closest to the answer that perhaps you are seeking, because Gita and some of those ones where it kind of appeals to you that does that karmanyeva dhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana, does that mean that you should have no desire? Is that the meaning, or the deep? Because if there is no desire, then there is no spur for innovation or spur for acting, right? Or is that just meaning that you have to de-link the effort from the result? But it is not as if you need not have desire. Having a desire per se may not be the incorrect thing. So the way some of these things over different periods of time have kind of revealed themselves to you, I would say Gita would perhaps, and maybe I have a bias. Maybe I have spent more time with Gita than I have done with others. So I would really not wish to discriminate.
So top 3 books which you find very impactful.
Okay, so these days I end up reading almost 100 odd pages worth of reading on almost a 1 to 2 day basis, right? This is because we are all digital, right? There is so much to consume, and you have to. So I once again, I wouldn't be able to give you the top 3 books, but some of them that kind of connected with me at different phases of my life. One was Notes to Myself, My Struggles to Become a Person. I'm forgetting the author's name. I think at a certain other period of time, the 7 habits of highly successful people was another one that did connect. I'm typically giving in those one which I think entrepreneurs will find useful.
True.
And Gita would be the third one.
Oh, that's great.
Gita. Yeah.
And any Netflix series?
Few series, any series, Hotstar, Netflix, wherever it is. Since you are a media person, you must tell us. Of course, you can tell of Zee also.
For sure. So I think some of the series that are really excellent for me is Marco Polo is one. The Roman Empire is another. Tsars is another. The Russian Tsars. The Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire. So in the category of docu series, they are not docu series. They're actually made so beautifully, and yet they have inculcated in, brought in the best of experts' opinion also to create it into a docu series is where it fits in the best. I think these 3-4 are the ones which will quickly come to mind. On the other hand, I think Money Heist is really, really very well made and keeps you on the edge. I think Fauda was very well made. I am also a big fan. I'm very fond of The Crown, which was one of the first ones that I got inducted with. And Narcos, of course, was very well made to the extent that it is a real person story. It connects at a different level.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you so much, Piyush.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a ton. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Yeah, bye. Thanks.